Hello, everyone, and welcome to Leader with Jennifer Zock. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by Diane Fountain, and allow me, to introduce you to Diane before we jump into our conversation. Diane is an accomplished human resources leader, experienced in aligning organizational culture to achieve strategic business objectives. She's proven successful in building relationships at all levels and partnering with senior leaders to facilitate change while successfully driving strategic objectives. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. You and I have been working together over several months now, adding somatic awareness to your leadership toolkit. Let's start with what was leadership like for you before somatic awareness?
Yeah, I always like to say that I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I kind of use that as my excuse for sometimes not always being in tune or self-aware with where how my emotions were affecting maybe my response to a situation or to something that someone had asked me about. And so um it's definitely something that I've now been able to understand that how your body feels, it's sending you a message and telling you that there's danger, or is this safe, or is it just uncomfortable, and are you able to get past it. And I would say before all of meeting with you and going through all of the sessions, I was not aware of that, and I would just react in the moment. And sometimes, that would come off in a way that I didn't want it to. It wasn't intended, and maybe sometimes having to loop back to people and explaining myself in more detail, or clarifying, or even apologizing in some cases. Yeah, sorry, I kind of overreacted in that situation. I just my emotions got the best of me.
Yeah, and that's very normal. We are always contending with our biological wiring to survive. And now that you have that awareness, how has that affected your relationship with yourself and with others?
Yeah. So, it's kind of like I've given myself permission to be okay with, with what's normal, right? It's just sometimes that you don't realize everybody else is going through some of the same things you are and feeling some of the same things. And so it's okay to have those emotional reactions, but to then feel it, recognize what it is, and then to be able to, you know, um, take a deep breath, or whatever your, things are that you do to manage that is has been really has been really helpful for me. So, and then you had a second part to the question. Say that again.
I asked about relationships with how it affected your relationship with yourself and with others.
Okay, yeah. And so, just as making that awareness to myself, and number one, allowing myself some grace, because you're working through, you're now aware, and sometimes that's the biggest piece, is awareness, and then how you manage that. And so then relationships with others, it feels like I've been able to give myself permission. One of my tools is to not answer questions right away. It may be that I get up and I take a walk. It may be that I just simply remove myself from the situation, or it may be that I ask those questions: Is this unsafe, or is this uncomfortable? And so that has given me an enormous amount of, I'm going to say, power, because I always felt like I had to be, the person that answered the question. It had to be the right answer. I had to hurry up and think really quick about what I was going to do to get that question right, or just respond and have people understand that I was engaged, in the conversation and things like that. And that was a lot of pressure I was putting on myself. And so that has helped me to actually have better relationships with people, even sometimes with people that you don't always have the best relationships with. Is there's so much power in giving yourself permission to say, I don't have the answer to that question right now, but I want to think about it, and I'll get back to you when I'm ready to revisit this conversation. You've just kind of given yourself a lot of power in that. And so that's given me a lot of comfort. And I think that's helped me with my emotions, reacting in an emotional way, maybe in a conversation or in a meeting or those kinds of things, because I've taken some of my own, it's my own pressure that I've put on myself. I've taken some of that away.
Yeah, yeah, and we all do that to ourselves. Can you share with our listeners what that journey has been like for you to develop and practice that skill set that is working so nicely for you?
Well, thank you to you for Jennifer for helping me through some difficult, times and some conversations, because, in this world there are definitely lots of wonderful people you meet every day, but there are also, and not that these aren't wonderful people, but difficult conversations that happen.
Sure.
And so, it takes a lot of practice, and it does sometimes still trigger some emotional responses.
Mhm.
And I've given myself that permission to just walk away. Now, I may spend a whole weekend thinking about that conversation, but you've really kind of narrowed in on some of the things that, are really drilling down on, is it unsafe or was it just uncomfortable? And stay curious, just ask
Yeah.
questions. And sometimes in the moment, I still feel myself emotionally triggered. So I use the tools that I have and I take myself away from the situation, give myself time to think. But then those are the things that pop up while I'm thinking, for the next day or so, is, was this an unsafe conversation? Was it uncomfortable? What would happen if this, and is it am I really unsafe, or is it okay to say this, or is it okay to ask these questions, and just ask more questions? Because that's inevitably what happens is, as you give yourself permission to think and think and think for maybe a day or two, you have way more questions. And so it gives me time to stay curious, which is a really good tool as well, to just keep asking questions.
Yeah, lead with that curiosity and just knowing that we don't have access to that curiosity and the thinking part of our brain when we're feeling threatened and in that fight, flight, freeze that
Yes.
we many of us have not been taught how to navigate because
Yes.
we if we are indeed in a situation where it is life threatening, we want that quick response, but in our day-to-day lives that the chances of that are rare, and we more often, I think, find ourselves having an overreaction and then returning to our thinking brain and then maybe having some cleanup to do that that could have been prevented. And I know you've done a really good job of using these tools in the moment to be extremely productive, and so that you can then come back to the table, and then there's ideas that weren't even there to begin with. Can you expand a little bit on that for our listeners?
Um, well, I think just exactly what you said, getting out of that emotional part of your brain so you can actually re-engage your brain and start thinking. And I just find that sometimes too, you maybe jump to conclusions or you think something's happening and it's not really happening. And so you get
Mhm.
your brain gets you into this space where you just can't think clearly. And so giving myself some time to move away, think about it, and come back and re-engage the conversation. And again, giving myself some of this power because then I re-engage the conversation and I start the conversation with some clarity that I needed in the very beginning to understand what the real situation was, what the question was, or things like that. So I feel like we have had a lot of change in the organization, a lot of leadership change, and there's been a lot of uncertainty about because in the interim, there was about a 9-month interim in there where no one really knew who was in charge, and so who we were to go to with specific things. And so there was a lot of conversations around making decisions and who needed to be in the room. And so there was a couple things that I didn't necessarily happen the way we had all maybe had our own opinions about how things should happen. And so being able to, step into that conversation in a way that allowed me to, again, give myself this permission to say, this isn't the way that I anticipated that we were going to work through this process. And, I think what we should do instead of kind of focusing on this situation that happened, it's what are let's work together to figure out a way that you and I can be on the same page going forward in these types of situations. And I think it would actually be beneficial for our new leader to have this information as well so that, she knows who's responsible for what and kind of a roles and responsibilities. And actually, since our new leader has gotten on board, she has kind of embraced this kind of this idea. And it's not roles and responsibilities, wasn't my idea, but in this moment, how we moved forward, she's kind of asked now that because she's a new leader, she really wants to understand everyone's roles and responsibilities. And so it's kind of morphed into a project across the unit where we're all sitting down and talking about, what our roles and responsibilities are. And it's interesting because um, people weren't always aligned. And so it's
Ah.
wonderful to have these conversations. And so it's created this um, this culture that we're all now kind of in this together, and everybody's kind of aware of who's doing what. And interestingly, that's also created this bond of teamwork where someone will say, well, I know this is something that I have on my list, but if I'm not able to do that, would you be able to help me with that? And everyone's just rallying around each other and saying, oh yeah, absolutely, I did that before in my last job, and so I'm happy to help you with putting that together or whatever that is. So it's actually um, this one really difficult situation turned out that once we got the right mindset and looked at it in a different way, we could move forward together.
That's a great story, Diane. Thank you so much for sharing that. And your leader is doing a beautiful job of really practicing something that I tell leaders that I work with is, if you focus on two things, if you focus on creating a culture of psychological safety and connection within your team, the rest will take care of itself. And it really sounds like
Yeah.
that's what's happening for you all. And I'm so happy for you.
Yep. Yeah.
You mentioned that uh, recognizing, noticing those, sensations that let you know to deploy your tools. And for people that this may be new to, can you explain what those sensations are for you? It's going to be different for every person, but what they are for you and how you learned to really build your timely awareness around those sensations.
Uh, Um, yeah, so for me, it's a sensation in the chest that I
Uh-huh.
start to feel really tight in the chest. But
Yeah.
for me, I am very aware that that immediately is a like disconnects my brain. And so it's something that now that I'm aware of that and how that causes my brain to just disconnect, it has helped me to um, be able to then put together my toolkit of these are the things that work for me. And sometimes, you're in a meeting and you're sitting around a table and you can't just get up and walk out. But
Right.
you can give yourself permission to say, let me think about that.
Yeah.
This is new. I have some ideas, but I want to think more about it, or, give yourself some space to do that. And then in the moment is to just breathe, just give
Yeah.
yourself some internal breathing. I do some meditation and I do some mindfulness when I know I'm going to be going into an extremely stressful situation, but you don't always know when those things are going to crop up. And so, you know, using what I can in the moment that I have to give myself a pause and let my body kind of go through its process, and then start to calm down so that I can think clearly is kind of um, what my practice has been. And it really is, meeting with you on a regular basis and um, feeling, you're asking me, how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? And um, it was a direct connection for me. It was like an aha moment because
Yeah.
I knew that I was struggling with my brain disconnecting in these moments. And I know
Hmm.
we've all said this. We've all said, "Man, I wish I would have thought about that in the moment," or "I
Yeah.
wish I would have said that." And that's exactly what was happening to me. So as soon as it kind of connected with me, and I had this aha moment, it's been something I just feel like I'm so excited to be able to use it, and it has helped me so immensely that I just I have to use it because now that I'm aware of it, it's becoming second nature.
Oh, I am so happy to hear that, Diane, because it's a process and it's a practice. And you're speaking to exactly why I am on a mission to put this skill into the hands of leaders. And it is so true. The body knows before the brain does. And if you can have a calm body, then you can have a clear mind. One last question before we wrap up our time together, and that would be, if you were to give one piece of advice to our listeners about somatic awareness, gaining that as a leadership skill, what would your advice be?
Um, Boy, that's a tough one. It's, because it's so personal for me how it's impacted me, but um, I think we all, as leaders, we all have these moments, and we all struggle with certain things. I mean, most leaders, spend a lot of time in meetings and spend time standing up in front of others. And that's where, this is really a key piece for me is being able to speak up, being able to contribute to the conversations, being that in that leadership role where I feel confident about myself and I can carry forward that presence as having a seat at the table and being a part of a leadership team that does have to have difficult conversations. And sometimes you may not all agree. And this is again a tool that you take a deep breath, you get your brain reconnected, and then you have those conversations. And in leadership, that's sometimes the difficult part is you don't always agree, and you have to be able to speak clearly and articulate in a rational way why you feel this whatever it is, initiative or project that you're working on might go in a certain way, or that you feel it should have a certain aspect to it, and be able to rationally have those conversations and resolve issues. And that's right. As being a leader, we're constantly coming up, people are bringing issues or concerns, and you have to figure out a way to work together with others to come up with resolutions, come up with ideas, and change is inevitable, and it's always happening. And figuring out how to navigate these waters, it's you have to be open and not feeling like every conversation, even though it's a difficult conversation, is where you have to have this fight or flight. It's you can be in the moment and have those conversations, but use your tools that you have and re-engage and reconnect and move forward in a positive way.
Diane Fountain, thank you for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful, and thank you for all of your guidance and support through my journey too.
You are most welcome. It has been my privilege.